Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome you all once again to Communication Theories 1 course. This course has a course code of JMC 311. This is lecture number 9 and this is the part 2 of the basic communication model. In this part 2, we are going to discuss transactional model of communication and interactive model of communication. I'm Anwar Khan, lecturer journalism in mass communication department, Cohort University of Science and Technology. Let's first of all have a look at the various discussion points that we would be discussing in our today's session. So first of all, we will explain a transactional model of communication. Then we will elaborate interactive model of communication. Then we will discuss features of transactional and interactive model of communication. Keep in mind that we will be discussing the features of each of the model separately. Then elements of transactional model of communication and interactive model of communication. So we would discuss it again separately. Examples from the real life. Well, it is necessary to understand that do we have any example of the transactional model and interactive model from the real life. So we would be answering to it. And well, it is also necessary to understand the differences between both models. That first of all, we studied the linear model of communication. So when linear model of communication is there, so what was the need of the transactional model of communication, and then why do we need the interactive model of communication? So what are the possible differences between these models? So we would address this question, and then finally we would look at the demerits or drawbacks of both these models. So these are basically our key points that we would be discussing and explaining in our today's session. And remember that these are our learning objectives as well. Of our students, they would be able to answer all these points after attending today's session. Fine. So these are our discussion points as well as our learning. So let's discuss the various features of transactional model of communication. So first of all, we say that this model of communication is also called a circular model of communication. So transactional model of communication or circular model of communication means the same thing. Then we say that it is a two-way communication process. Two-way communication process means that the communication will flow from the sender to receiver and then from receiver to the sender. And that is the reason that it is called two-way communication process. The response or the message given by receiver to the sender is in the form of the feedback. So we say that feedback is there, and that is the reason that this model of communication is a two-way communication process. Okay. Another element which is also very important is that the non-verbal communication elements, they are also very important in this type of communication. So what are the non-verbal communication elements? They are in the form of the, or we can say that facial expression, body language, accent, tone, etc. All of them, they come together and play active role in the transactional model of communication. So we can say that besides verbal communication elements, which is the language, which is the words we are using, so the non-verbal communication elements, they also play important role in it. Then we have third point, which is a complex one, that humans are senders and receivers simultaneously. Therefore, uses the term communicator for them. Well, what happens that according to this model, we are sender and receiver simultaneously. We are not like sender at one time and receiver at another time, but we are sender and receiver simultaneously at the same time. Well, some models that we have studied a linear model of communication, or the another model of which is coming, which is in the form of the interactive model of communication. It considers that we are sender at one time and receiver at another time. But according to this model, we are sender and receiver at the same time. Okay. So this is a complex point. I hope that it would be now easy for you people to understand. Then we say that in this communication, the both these sender and receiver, they are interdependent upon each other to have effective communication process. The example can be like if two friends are talking, and for example, if the sender is giving the message to the receiver and receiver is not paying attention or listening to the sender, So surely the sender will ask the receiver that you are not listening to me. Fine. So in this type of communication, the participants, which are in the form of the sender and receiver, they are interdependent upon each other. Okay. Then we have another point which is also very important, which is that according to this model, we communicate to make social realities. Well, it is quite true. And according to this model sees communication from a very broader perspective, from a broader lens. And for this model, communication is not a simple phenomenon, but a very broad phenomenon, fine, which includes so many other things. And that is the reason that they say that communication makes social realities. So what do we mean by social realities? Social realities means a reality that we see or exist in the society, and this can be in the form of the relations, this can be in the form of the taking class, attending the lecture, can be in the form of the policy making, group making, community making, fine. So these are the social realities. So for from the transactional model of communication, communication is a very broader term, and the same thing has been explained by two other scholars, Norman Fairclough and Michael Foucault. Both of them, they have worked a lot on the same thing, that the discourse or the language or the communication is used to make social realities, fine. And they are, both of them, they are renowned figures and scholars of the critical discourse analysis. Then we say that this model of communication, we have numerous other elements like the field of experience, relational context, social context. I mean, these three terms we would be explaining in the very next slide. So that is the reason that we say that this, I mean, this model of communication, we have communication from a very broader perspective, because we have the field of experience, we are having the relational context, we have the social context, we have the cultural context, and we consider all these elements in communication. So these are few of the features of the transactional model of communication. So let's discuss the various elements of transactional model of communication. So the first one is the sender and the receiver, and the sender and receiver are called communicator, as we discussed in the previous slide, that sender and receiver, they are called communicator. So communicator 1, communicator 2, communicator 1 is the sender, communicator 2 is the receiver. So it means that sender will act like the encoder and the decoder. Similarly, receiver will act like the decoder and the encoder, fine. So sender and receiver will act like encoder and decoder simultaneously. Okay, then we have the message. So what do we mean by message? Message is basically the information or the data what the sender wants to share with the receiver, and that is very important, because message has an objective, and that is the reason that we initiate, or the communicator initiate the communication process. So message is basically the data or the information, and this message can be in the form of the can be in written form, can be in oral form, can be in pictorial form, fine, it can be in any form, this message. Then we have the channel. Again, channel is basically the medium or the source through which communication takes place, and verily we need a communication channel for the communication, because without communication, without channel or without source, communication cannot take place, fine. So this channel can be in the form of the print media, like the newspaper, magazine, etc. It can be in the form of the electronic media, like the radio, newspaper, etc. It can be in the form of the online media or the internet. Similarly, it can be in the form of the air, this channel, because without air we may not be able to communicate when we are having face-to-face communication. So this channel, again, very important for the communication, and it plays a vital role in the communication process. How to secure the channel while you are doing communication, because the I mean, if you look at the intelligence activities, or you look at the various activities, so you would come to know that which channel to use and how to keep secure that very channel, because if the intelligence operatives, when they are communicating with each other, so they are not communicating in a very normal message form, they are making the codes, fine. I mean, then it becomes very broad perspective, if we want to discuss message and channel, that how to keep your communication secure and safe. Okay, then we have the four, which is in the form of the noise. Noise, as we have already discussed, is in the form of the barrier or a disruption in the communication process. So what happens that when two friends are communicating and someone in the background is shouting, so that boy is a barrier, is a noise, because that boy is disturbing your message. And this noise or barrier can be in the form of the physical, can be in the form of a semantic noise, it can be in the form of the psychological noise, and there are many other types of the noises. Okay, then we have the feedback. We have already discussed it, that when the reply is given by the receiver to the sender, this reply is in the form of the feedback. And we know about the value of the feedback, because you would have seen that in many of the campaign seminars, feedback is taken from the participants. Well, so what is the reason? The reason is to know whether the participants understood or not, what was their feedback about the program, and their feedback then is used to make the communication or to make the program more effective. So feedback is very important in it. Then we have three other elements which play important role in transactional model of communication. One is the cultural value, relational value, field of experience, and cultural values, and other values which play important and key role in transactional model of communication. So cultural value means that when you are communicating, so you need to have or keep in mind the cultural values and norms in mind. For example, if you are in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, so the value or the cultural values are something else. For example, if you are sitting in a hujra, so over there we see that we need to keep calm because the elders are there, and we let them speak. And what happens that we try this, I mean, this is our cultural norm, that we try to learn from their conversation when they are making communication with each other. So we try to learn from their communication. So this is our Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Pashtun norm. So if you move to Punjab or Islamabad, surely I mean it would be the same thing, that you would let your elders speak, fine, but surely there would be cultural differences are over there. Similarly, if you move to abroad, let's suppose if you move to England or US or Australia or Canada, so surely the cultural values are different than the Pakistani culture. So you would need to understand the cultural values and then adjust yourself in those values to have effective communication. Relational context, what do we mean by it? Relational context means the closer the relation, the more frank and open communication that would be. For example, the communication we have with our friends, we cannot have that type of communication or a selection of words or language, fine, with our brothers or sisters or father. We need to be more formal with our father or brother or sister as compared to our friends. I mean, with our friends, we are informal, while if we are at home and speaking with our father, we are very much formal. So this is actually the relational context which makes or affects our communication. Okay, then we have the field of experience. Field of experience is basically the experience or the knowledge that the sender and the receiver have, and this basically affects the formulation and the interpretation of the message. For example, a teacher is taking the class, so the teacher keeps the field of experience of the student in mind, and according to that field of experience, the teacher communicates with him, because he knows that which language they understand, which examples they understand, fine. So he or she chooses or gives examples from that very field and uses that very language, and the teacher knows that the students understand easy words, so he uses very easy words, uses the easy language, fine. So this is basically the field of experience. So we came to know about the elements of transactional model of communication. um, these are basically the elements of this very model. Okay, now examples of transactional model of communication from the communication perspective. So one is the Berlin's transactional model, helical model of communication. We have Beaker's mosaic model of communication. So these are the three examples from the communication perspective, which are following the transactional model of communication. Fine. So these are the three examples. So from the everyday life, do we have an example? Well, yes, we have it. So it is in the form of the interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication is the best example of the transactional model of communication, where cultural values, where relational values, where a field of experience, right, where the facial expression, body language, accent, tone, all of them come together and play its role. And it is a two-way communication, a process, as we have already discussed. Fine. So interpersonal communication is a best example of the transactional model. Okay, interactive model of communication. This is the third model, uh, interactive model of communication. So what are the features of interactive model of communication? So first we need to understand that this model is also called convergence model of communication. So interactive model of communication or convergence model of communication means the same thing. This model is again a two-way communication process, that the communication will flow from the sender to receiver and then from the receiver to the sender. It means that two-way communication and feedback is there. Okay, in this model of communication, we have the participants. We have the participants in the form of the sender and the receiver, but these are, these participants alternate their positions as sender and receiver, fine. And these are basically the differences that we would be studying at the very end of this presentation. So we have sender and receiver whom alternate their positions. Fine. I mean, at one time they would be sender, at another time they would become receiver. So we have two-way communication process. Feedback is there, and there is sender and receiver whom alternate their positions. And then we say that this model of communication is a bit newer one as compared to the transactional model of communication and linear model of communication. And this model is well suited for the new technologies like the web or the online. Fine. Okay, various elements of interactive model of communication. Well, I think we have already discussed. I mean, most of the elements we have already discussed it. We have sender and receiver. This sender behaves or encodes and makes the message, sends it to the receiver. Receiver, after receiving the message, decode it, and then this receiver becomes the sender, behaves or encodes a message and gives this message in the form of the in the form of the feedback to the receiver. So we are a receiver at one time, and then sender at one time and a receiver at another time. Fine. And we do have noise over here again, and this noise can be in the form of the physical noise, semantic noise, physiological barriers. So we do have these problems over here as well. So we have this problem, and we have encoder, source, decoder. We have already discussed it. We have message. We have already discussed it. We have channel. We have noise. We have the feedback. We have the field of experience. So all these points we have already discussed in the transactional model of communication. Okay. Let's have example from the communication perspective for this model. So interactive model of communication example is Schramm's interactive model. So we can say that Schramm model is using or following this interactive model of communication, and this example is from the communication. Okay, from the everyday life, do we have an example? So, well, yes, we have it. And as we said that this model is well suited for the new media. So for the new media, it is well suited, and it is the best example that we use in our daily life. Internet, we use Facebook, we use Twitter, we use Instagram, TikTok. I mean, all the new technologies which are evolving and emerging in the 21st century, we are using it, and these are the best examples of the interactive interactive model of communication. Also have some of the demerits. Let's study it, that what are those demerits. So first of all, we say that there is feedback, there is no doubt, but the problem is that this feedback is not simultaneous. What does it mean? It means that when you are communicating, so at the same time feedback is not given to you, and this feedback can take a long time, as this model is mostly used for the internet. Fine. I hope that this point is now easy for you people, because you are communicating on the internet. You are, for example, if following someone, for example, we can say that if you are following Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf chairman Imran Khan on Twitter, and you reply to one of his tweets, so and you wait that Imran Khan would reply to you, so then surely we know that millions of people are following him, and it would be very much difficult for him to give reply individually to everyone. Fine. So what happens that feedback in this model of communication is very slow and is not simultaneous, and this model of communication becomes a linear model of communication if the a reply is not given to you. For example, if the reply is not given by the Imran Khan, then this type of communication, this interactive communication would become a linear model of communication. And another example can be that if you are reading a story from the Dawn News, and there is actually a comments box at the bottom of each story, and you post a comment over there, and I mean, when you post a comment over there, then the authorities surely they are busy in different activities of the newspaper or other activities, so they may not be able to give you the reply or the feedback simultaneously. You will need to wait for the feedback. Maybe they give you the reply a day after, or 2 days after, or 3 days after, or maybe they do not give you the reply. So this is actually a problem of the interactive model of communication, that feedback is not simultaneous, and sometimes feedback is not there. The second criticism or the demerit of this model of communication is that communication is not taken as dynamic, and it is quite true, because what happens that you are communicating on the internet, fine, or online when you are communicating, so you will need for the another person to get free and give you the reply. If he gives you the reply, then that would be a two-way communication, and we would call it a dynamic communication. But if he or she does not give you the reply, then you cannot force them to give you the reply. Fine. That is the reason that we say that communication in this interactive model of communication is not dynamic, whereas we take the same communication as dynamic in the transactional model of communication. Okay, differences. What are the differences? So we came to know that feedback in transactional model of communication is almost always simultaneous. Okay, we came to know about it, and we have discussed it, that in transactional model of communication, the feedback is always simultaneous. Well, I have written down the almost word, that I mean, when having face-to-face communication, so we can understand from the language of the person or the receiver or the sender that what they want to say or what is the meaning. Or if we cannot guess from the language, so from the facial expression we would come to know. For example, uh, uh, in the class, after taking the I mean, in the class when there is a question answer session, and for example, if there is no question answer session because of the shortage of the time, so the teacher can understand from the facial expressions of the student that whether they are getting the point or not. Fine. So in transactional model of communication, we have feedback very simultaneous, while in the interactive model of communication, it depends upon the sender, as we have already discussed it, that if you post a comment in the newspaper, or to Donald Trump or Imran Khan or to Nawaz Sharif, to any person, so what will happen, that you will need to wait for the reply of the sender. If they give you the reply, it's okay. Otherwise, I mean, that would become a linear model of communication then. Okay, transactional model of communication, a person is sender and receiver at the same time and is called communicator. While in interactive model of communication, participants change roles as sender and receiver. Well, we have already discussed this very point as well, that from the perspective of the transactional model of communication, we are sender and receiver at the same time. It does not mean that we are sender at one time and we will be receiver at another point. No, we are sender and receiver at the same time. And according to interactive model of communication, we are sender at one time and receiver at another time. Well, we need to understand this complex point because this is a bit complex. I hope that it would be easy for you people. Well, the third one is that this model of communication, I mean the transactional model of communication, includes more complex understanding of the context. I mean, context area, because we have studied about the field of experience. We came to know about the cultural context. We came to know about the social context. We came to know about the relational context, right? While in the interactive model of communication, all of them, they are not necessary. Fine. So that is the reason that we say the transactional model of communication involves more complex understanding of the context. So these are uh, some of the differences which has been outlined by one of the communication scholars, Berlins, right, in his article 1970. So these are the few differences between the two models. And thank you very much for listening. I hope that it would be easy for you people to understand. So we have discussed transactional model, elements of transactional model, features of transactional models, examples from the communication perspective, and example from the everyday life. Similarly, we discussed the interactive model. We came to know about various elements, features of interactive model of communication. Then we came to know about its example from the communication perspective and from the everyday life. So and then the differences between both these models. So I hope that it would be easy for you people. If you have any sort of query or question, comment in the comment box. I will be there to answer it. See you in the next lecture. Till that, stay home, stay safe. Allah Hafiz.